Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a game that was not on my radar at all. I remember seeing its first trailer and thinking, hey, this looks pretty cool, and what an interesting premise. Then I saw it was Persona-style turn-based combat, and I immediately switched back off. Now, I know this is a very strange thing for me to do, especially with the added context that my second favourite game of 2023 was Baldur's Gate 3, another game that operates on turn-based combat. You'd think that I'd have learnt by now not to write off a game fully based on something so rudimentary as how it handles its combat, as that game just may end up becoming one of the best games I've played in the last decade. This is the case, again, with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. After abandoning my playthrough of Assassin's Creed Shadows, I grabbed Clair Obscur on Game Pass. Couldn't hurt to give it a go, and I needed something to play before Doom: The Dark Ages came out. Fast forward 30 minutes in, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has succeeded where many have not. It immediately has me, with extremely satisfying turn-based combat, as well as a story that immediately put me into an emotional chokehold. I am fully hooked on what it is selling, an extremely positive indicator of things to come. Now, before we begin, a quick warning that this video contains heavy spoilers. I say this now as I'm a firm believer that this is one game that you should go into as blind as possible. Before the main story begins, there is an event known as the Fracture, where the world is split and destroyed, leaving humanity on the brink of extinction. An extinction that appears to be perpetrated by the Paintress, a towering figure of a woman who resides under a large monolith, and every year she changes the number on that monolith, going down from 100, counting down by 1. As a result, anyone that age dies. This event comes to be known as the Gamage. The voyages to try and stop this event become known as expeditions. As the story begins, we first meet Gustav, a Batman-looking, daredevil-sounding gentleman, as he laments the imminent passing of his love interest Sophie in the 33rd Gamage. It happens, she vanishes, and Gustav, along with his adopted daughter Maëlle and the other expeditioners, prepare for the 33rd expedition. Eventually, we come to learn that this world we find ourselves in is not what it seems. It's a microcosm, taking place entirely within a canvas in the real world, where all our characters are creations of the all-powerful painters. And we soon learn that the reason why everything is the way it is all boils down to a power struggle within one family of painters, all of whom have been broken and scarred both emotionally and physically from a death in the family, that of their brother and son Verso. One side, led by Renoir, the patriarch of the family, wishes to erase the canvas and move on, while one side, led by the mother Aline, wishes to keep the canvas alive, as it's the last connection to the real Verso they have, arguing that a piece of his soul remains in the canvas. Then we have what I can only describe as the sleeper main character, Maëlle. As it turns out, her real name is Alicia, and she is a member of this painter family, and she went into the canvas but lost control, and ended up being reborn as a new creation, Maëlle, complete with a life's worth of memories and experiences. After regaining her memories, she too wishes to remain inside the canvas, and endeavors to save it from being erased. Okay, are we confused yet? That was very broad strokes. No pun intended. What starts as a plot centered on humanity's hopeless fight against an omnipotent and almost tyrannical force takes so many unexpected twists and turns that it becomes genuinely hard to keep track of everything. I should be clear, that isn't a critique. I genuinely loved that I was completely lost most of the time, as I knew that the answers would come eventually, whether I wished them to or not. We come to realize that, at its core, Clair Obscur is a story about the impact of loss, the grief, and the lengths a person will go to either avoid confronting that grief, or maybe even try and beat it, by retreating into an ideal world where grief can't harm them, or a world where that loss never happened. But in reality, to what extent does not processing that grief not only hurt you, but also those around you? It's so easy for the "this world isn't real" plot twist to retroactively lessen the impact of the story's prior emotional moments. But in reality, the way Clair Obscur is written, it never diminishes those moments, but rather enhances these moments by having you as the player ask yourself questions like, if they're not real, why do I care? What is real? Who am I? Why do I even exist? The answer is this. You still care because even if these characters aren't real in the traditional sense, they were real to you. What you experienced with them was real. Each victory, each loss, and each gut-wrenching moment all really did happen. Towards the end of the game, Clair Obscur hits you with a scenario that anyone who has ever experienced grief has considered more than once. What if you could bring them all back? And that brings us to the near impossible choice right at the end of the game, where we decide the fate of the canvas either as Verso, who wishes for the canvas to be erased so him and the other painted entities can find peace, or save the canvas as Mael, the youngest member of a painter family, who is hellbent on remaining inside the canvas and bringing back all those they have lost. For me, I thought I completely messed up when I decided to choose Verso's ending, to defeat Mael and erase the painting, as it meant that, well, everyone died, but it did mean that the first stages of healing could begin within Mael's family. That is until I replayed and got the second ending, where you play as Mael and fight Verso, and in this ending, everyone that died previously has been returned. They're all smiling and laughing, and everyone is happy. Everything is perfect. Too perfect. As we suddenly discover Mael has gone off the deep end, and has been fully consumed by the enticing dream world of the canvas. Both endings represent a possible avenue that can be taken when dealing with grief. Do we push through that grief and come out the other side ready for the healing to begin, or do we stay in our safe dream world while the underlying grief eats away at us to a point we completely lose ourselves? Now, looking at the writing and the dialogue, maybe it is recency bias, maybe it's not, but I will just say it's probably the best I've heard from a game in a good long time. It has this uncanny ability to have you laughing to tears at the silliness of it all, and then the next moment have you in actual, real tears, experiencing absolute trauma, having no idea when or if you'll ever recover from what just happened. And then you realize you're only 10 hours in, and however you're feeling, sad or happy, you know that you are completely locked in for whatever comes next. The writing of dialogue in Clair Obscur is simply fluid. It doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel too scripted, it feels, for the lack of a better word, real. For me, it's success in 3 distinct areas. The stellar work of the writer's room, incredible motion capture performances, and a stacked voiceover cast. All these elements come together in a triple threat that creates some of the best performances I've seen in a game. To you, as the viewer, that may feel like an exaggeration. Trust me, it's not. The cast of this game genuinely gives it their all, selling line after line after line, bar after bar, with absolutely zero misses. To put it plainly, I would be shocked if there weren't at least 2 Best Performance nominations at the Game Awards later this year. Here's a thought. Isn't it amazing how much you can improve combat in your game by simply adding a good parry system? With turn-based combat, especially the kind that Clair Obscur deploys, there is always a risk of it becoming repetitive and perhaps a bit boring. However, the developers, Sandfall, have taken steps to ensure that combat literally never feels that way through its character combat mechanics and other mechanics such as the parry and the dodge. Looking at the parry system first, it's a fantastic addition that makes you feel way more involved in the combat, taking a tried and tested formula of turn-based combat, one that can sometimes feel like the player is more of a spectator rather than an active participant, and fundamentally improving on it. It is a system that carries high risk and high reward. You as the player have the choice. Attempt a dodge, where the window of success is much larger, or the more narrow and twitch timing of the parry that can provide benefits in the form of counterattacks that deal massive damage. It was a tricky system to grasp initially, but when I mastered it, it became not only the best turn-based combat I've ever played, but also the best combat in any game I've played, hands down. Another large part of the gameplay loop is the different characters' abilities and fighting styles. This was completely unexpected, as I, for some reason, assumed they would all have the same moves across the board. Again, I had some serious misgivings about the combat element, especially, and put it simply, I wasn't expecting it to have as much depth as it did. Each character has a gimmick. Take Verso, for example, who operates on a grading system, where the higher his grade, the higher his damage. And then we have Minoko, who can mimic nearly every enemy as long as he's there to collect their feat. Each character has something to bring to the table, and the goal is finding a perfect synergy, dedicating time to the members of your party and also their order of play, and how exactly their abilities can feed into and also complement each other. If you go into a fight and don't come correct, the game will very quickly humble you. Which leads me on to difficulty. While not exactly Souls-like levels of hard, the game can have some serious difficulty spikes. But to be fair, it more often than not does warn you that the fight you're about to go into will be difficult. It's up to you on whether you listen to them or not. My one complaint regarding Clair Obscur Expedition 33's gameplay is its tutorialization. On the one hand, the game will give you the option to dedicate time to learning new characters' movesets as soon as they're introduced, which I liked and was actually very grateful for, as it meant that I didn't immediately write off a new character in favour of the synergy I already had. Don't get me wrong, I did do that. As you can probably guess from the gameplay, I pretty much constantly ran a party consisting of Verso, Lune, and Mael. But it did mean that when the reserve team of CL and Minoko did need to go in, it meant I could still hold my own with these characters who I didn't use as much. While this instance of tutorialization was good, there are other instances where it can get a little confusing, or perhaps a little too wordy, and that's mostly to do with Lumina and Pictos. After actually understanding the Pictos mechanics, it's actually super simple. You equip a Pictos to a character, they get a buff to a stat, along with a passive ability specific to that Pictos. After 4 fights, the passive on that Pictos becomes available to all other party members, as long as they have the Lumina to pay for it. Now, on the surface of it, this is super simple, but I did not fully understand this mechanic until at least halfway through, which is about 15 hours in. Maybe this is on me, and an overall lack of experience with these type of games, but at the time I felt the game's tutorialization of this mechanic felt almost over-explained, to a point it felt complicated, but in reality it wasn't at all. I will say that this is just one of those rather nitpicky complaints that I can find in an otherwise incredibly well put together game. At the Game Awards 2024, Sven Vink, the head of Larian Studios, the company responsible for Baldur's Gate 3, delivered a speech in which he half-jokingly said he knew who was going to win in 2025 after visiting an oracle. He describes the winner as one that was made by a team that set out to make a game they wanted to play themselves. One that wasn't bogged down by arbitrary goals of increasing market shares or loaded with features that were only there to increase revenue and didn't serve the game's design. And most importantly, they didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. The speech continues, and it's a borderline rallying cry against what the industry, especially within the AAA sector, has become. A money-hungry meat grinder where art is lost in favour of content. Content that is milled at an exponential rate, with little to no variation or care. Like many people have, they come back and listen to this speech again, and they find that if it were a checklist, then Clair Obscur Expedition 33 ticks all the boxes for not only a future Game of the Year contender, but also an instant classic that people will be talking about for years to come. Whilst we are only halfway through the year, I am fully ready to hedge my bets on Clair Obscur achieving that coveted title. But awards are not the be-all and end-all of a game. What matters most is what you, as the player, think. For me, I think that for the rest of the year, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is going to be the standard by which all games I play will be measured. And if you haven't played it yet, I strongly recommend you do, as creativity like this needs all the support it can get.